How many symbiotes are there, and how is their family tree arranged? The symbiote arc is perhaps one of the most iconic storylines in all of Spider-Man's comic history, and has been adapted across live action, animation, and video games on more than one occasion. The mainline Venom Symbiote, however, is not the only symbiote, and over the years, several other symbiotic entities have spawned all across the universe. Interestingly enough though, most of these symbiotes are directly related to one another in some way or another. So stick with us today, my fellow heroes in training, and let's discuss the symbiote family tree. The first symbiote, informally known as the Venom Symbiote, first bonded with Peter Parker. Originally, Peter encountered the suit during the Secret Wars arc, but in more modern retellings, the symbiote either crashes on a meteor or hitches a ride back to Earth with the astronaut John Jameson. This largely relegates the Black Suit storyline to Earth, but we already published a more in-depth breakdown on the Black Suit, its effects on Peter and other hosts, and what all it can do, so be sure to check out that video as well, as we break down why Peter Parker and the symbiote were a near perfect match. But back to the family tree. The symbiotes formerly hail from the planet known as Clintar, and were created by the malevolent pseudo-god known as Null. Venom's baseline symbiote has been altered and splintered several different ways, and his most famous clone is known as Mania. First cloned by the Ararat Corporation, Mania's primary host was Patricia Robertson, who created a cybernetic collar with the specific intention of controlling the symbiote. This aid made her bond with the symbiote less conflicted than some of the others, and she specifically set out to kill the original Venom. Her conflict with Eddie Brock, however, was short-lived until the Venom symbiote abandoned Brock in favor of Flash Thompson, otherwise known as Agent Venom. While the Jack-o'-lantern attempted to kill Andy Benton, Flash Thompson inadvertently bonded with the Venom symbiote to become Agent Venom, doing so while Andy later took on the title of Mania. She used this alias for some time, fighting crime and helping wherever she was needed, but unfortunately over time, her symbiote became corrupted by the Hell Mark. Andy held out as long as she could before parting ways with the symbiote, who found its next host in Army Ranger Lee Pace. The title of Mania, or Maniac, has since been passed around between a few different hosts, but the origin of the symbiote began as a clone of Venom. After the symbiote left Eddie Brock, however, traces of it were still present in his bloodstream, and unbeknownst to Brock and the rest of the world, these traces, however, later manifested in cancer. Eddie, in his now sickened state, began to volunteer at the Feast Foundation, where he would cross paths with Martin Lee, otherwise known as Mr. Negative. In an attempt to rid Eddie of his cancer, Lee used his power and accidentally created an altered symbiote known as Anti-Venom. By mutating the symbiotic remains, he created an entirely new organism splintered from the original Venom symbiote. What's interesting about Anti-Venom, however, is that it is not sentient. It doesn't have a personality, desires, or any ability to control its host. Instead, its host remains in complete control over the symbiote's power set, making it a rather large deviation from the original incarnation. This symbiote demonstrates incredible healing powers far beyond the regular symbiote has ever been able to achieve. While the other symbiotes can oftentimes make repairs to their host's bodies, Anti-Venom can remove impurities entirely, curing even genetic and chronic illnesses in the process. Unfortunately, the symbiote was later destroyed in an attempt to create a cure for the spider virus, but was artificially recreated later on. The symbiotes oftentimes come with a toxic shock response that can be dangerous or even fatal for hosts, and Dr. Steven attempted to use research and remnants of the anti-venom to create a cure for this affliction. What he eventually created was a serum designed to alleviate the impacts of the shock syndrome. When given to Eddie Brock in larger doses, it was able to reassemble the remains of the anti-venom into something of a synthetic replica that was very close to the original. The primary Venom symbiote, however, does have direct offspring that aren't classified as clones or alterations. Perhaps the most famous of these is Carnage. This symbiotic offspring was produced in Eddie's prison cell asexually, doing so as it attempted to rescue Eddie. What makes the Carnage symbiote unique, however, is how it's bonded to its host, Cletus Cassidy. Most symbiotes attach to their hosts and create suits around them, but this symbiote infected a nasty cut on Cassidy's hand. As a result, the symbiote entered Cassidy's very bloodstream and fused with him entirely, creating one being. This created the one singular identity of Carnage rather than two like most symbiotic bonds, and the symbiote made Cassidy's bloodlust far more dangerous than he could have ever been without it. As a sadistic serial killer, Cassidy now had the means to evade law enforcement and murder freely without anyone who could stop him. The Carnage symbiote, however, even has several offspring of its own, but more on that in just a moment. Before we cover these, let's discuss some of Carnage's siblings, which are also classified as offsprings of Venom. When the Venom Symbiote was in the possession of the Life Foundation, CEO Carlton Drake forcibly removed 5 seeds from the alien specimen, and later would use them to completely recreate 5 synthetic symbiote creatures. His intention was to create a superhuman police force to safeguard the clients of the Life Foundation, and so he gave these symbiotes to 5 different hosts with varying effects. The first of which, a schizophrenic soldier by the name of Donna Diego, received the Scream symbiote. While Scream is oftentimes associated with Donna Diego, it is also bonded with Andy Benton as well, who we mentioned a little earlier in our video. Using Benton as a test subject, Dr. Steven was able to merge a sample of the Scream symbiote with genetics pulled from Anti-Venom in order to create the symbiote known as Silence. On several occasions, Scream has actually created wings out of her biomass that allow her to fly, which is not a common trait for other symbiotes and hasn't often been used outside of the Scream iteration, although Venom himself has used this on more than one occasion. Riot, however, was the symbiote we saw used by Carlton Drake in the 2018 Venom film. In the comics, however, Riot and Carlton were not the original hosts. In the comics first, Riot bonded with a member of the security team, an officer by the name of Trevor Cole. While symbiotes like Scream elected to take on a more agile approach, Riot had a particular affinity for blunt and bludgeoning weapons, doing so in an attempt to take a more direct approach in combat. In general, Riot is the closest to the original Venom symbiote and displays powers that are nearly identical both in their capabilities and their preferences. The 3 remaining symbiotes in this batch of offspring were Lasher, Phage, and Agony, each of whom were bonded with another member of Life's security forces. Lasher was bonded with an operative by the name of Ramon Hernandez and takes on a more greenish tint, while Phage and Agony are more yellow and purple respectively. With security officers Carl Mack and Leslie Jenneria bonded to Phage and Agony symbiotes respectively, these 5 together became the Foundation's Guardian symbiotes. All of them have done direct battle with Spider-Man, and at one point in the Mojave Desert, they were all able to ambush him at once and give him a formidable challenge. As they grew, however, they eventually collided not just with Spider-Man, Venom, and other symbiotes, but with each other as well. After the original 4 hosts had all been killed by Scream, the remaining 4 symbiotes were taken into government custody without any host bodies for them to bond to. For some time, Dr. Edmund Zwerlik conducted experiments on them and took a deep dive into the science behind their biology and physiology. When an army of symbiotes invaded Earth, however, Venom was forced to release a global shriek that would wipe out all of the invaders. This international calamity, however, was felt even in the depths of even the Adirondack mountain range, the secret base where the symbiotes were hidden. In order to survive, these 4 remaining symbiotes bonded together into one being known as Hybrid. They bonded with a guard named Scott Washington in order to escape, and although they denied each other for a time, the composite eventually found its way back to Washington. Scott, now filled with rage after his brother's death, embraced the identity of Hybrid. He was able to pull attributes of each of the symbiotes, including camouflage, aerodynamics, and the ability to glide, in addition to the standard formation of constructs and superhuman strength. The symbiote even cured Scott's paralysis and allowed him to nightlight as the anti-hero known as Hybrid. While Venom's various hosts only have to navigate one voice inside of their mind, Washington had to deal with a symbiote with split personalities. Fragments of the original 4 were all present and all attempted to sway Washington into their method of solving problems, making for an incredibly chaotic and a difficult relationship. As we mentioned before though, the Carnage symbiote also had offspring of its own, so let's take a moment to circle back and talk about some of them. beginning with Toxin. One of the most dangerous symbiotes to date, Toxin is believed to be the strongest in its family line, surpassing Venom and Carnage. Traced directly from Null himself, Toxin is the 1000th symbiote offspring in the direct family line, and has strength that rivals even the strongest of his relatives. His first host was a cop by the name of Pat Mulligan, and the two were able to do quite a bit of good for a while. Venom and Carnage were both able to tell that Toxin had the capacity for good, and decided to even team up against him as a result. But Toxin's bond with Mulligan proved to be a valuable symbiosis. They helped to catch various villains who had escaped from the raft all the way until Mulligan was murdered by Blackheart, and the Toxin symbiote was taken into the custody of the Crime Master. The Crime Master then forced Eddie Brock to become its next host, and the two began their stint as the next iteration of Toxin on the Savage Six. But Toxin did have another, the sibling, known as Raze. Raze has perhaps the shortest lifespan of any symbiote to date. Manifested from the Carnage symbiote during a ritual involving the Darkhold, the symbiote known as Raze bonded with Jubilile Van Scooter. This allowed her to manifest a connection with the psychic energies of the world and fight against the demon god Kuthon, who had been recently summoned to Earth. It is here where Raze would subsequently die defending Earth, and this leads us finally into the symbiote known as Scorn. After the prison break on the raft, Dr. Michael Hall used an offspring of the Carnage symbiote combined with technological prosthesis in order to create the symbiote known as Scorn. What makes Scorn unique is its technological affinity, which resulted from Hall's own experiments. This allows its constructs to be far more technologically advanced than any other symbiote, and it can create some of the most dangerous devices of any symbiote to date. It also has various programming and cybernetic capabilities that others do not, which can allow it to interface with technology and control it on an unprecedented level. But anyway, my friends, what do you think of the symbiotes and their family tree? Which of these are your favorite, and which of them would you like to see in the future in either the MCU or Sony's Spider-Verse? Thank you as always so much for visiting the channel today. Hit that subscribe button to assemble and join our team, and I'll see you in the next one.